The worst part about being captured wasn't the torture or the impending execution. It was the ceiling. Captain Davros Kern had been staring at it for 3 days now, watching the crystalline surface pulse with bioluminescent patterns that seemed almost alive. Sometimes the patterns looked like constellations he recognized from Earth's night sky. Other times they resembled things he'd rather not think about, anatomical diagrams, perhaps, or maps of neural pathways. The Talveshi had a gift for making even their prison cells feel like a dissertation on why resistance was futile. He shifted against the wall, and the gravity responded by increasing just enough to make the movement uncomfortable. Neat trick that. The cell's AI, if you could call it that, had learned his rhythms over the past 72 hours. Every time he started to drift toward sleep, the gravity would shift, not dramatically. Just a 10% increase here, a slight angular change there, enough to keep him perpetually exhausted but never quite broken. Kern had named the AI Barbara after his first commanding officer, who'd had a similar talent for making him miserable in precisely calibrated doses. "Good morning, Barbara," he said to the empty cell. "Sleep well. Oh wait, you're a semi-sentient prison management system grown from weaponized fungi. You don't sleep. My mistake." The walls pulsed violet, which he decided meant Barbara was annoyed. Or maybe it meant the filtration system was processing waste. With Talveshi technology, the two weren't mutually exclusive. His mind wandered back to the capture as it had countless times already. The mission had been simple in theory. Recon sweep of the Helix Nebula's outer bands, map the Talveshi patrol routes, get out before anyone noticed. Simple, clean. The kind of assignment that got you a commendation and a drink afterward. Instead, they'd flown straight into a hunter formation that had no business being there. 12 Talveshi interceptors materializing out of what should have been empty space, their hulls doing that disturbing phase shift thing that made them look like they existed in 4 dimensions simultaneously. His navigator, Chen, had actually screamed. Kern didn't blame her. He'd wanted to scream himself. The frigate Defiant Proposition, named during a particularly optimistic moment in Earth's war effort, had lasted 7 minutes. Long enough for his crew to scatter in the escape pods, drawing fire and attention. Long enough for Kern to purge the navigation database and encrypt the backup cores with a password so obscure even he'd probably forget it. Long enough to send one last transmission on the emergency band. Tell my ex-wife she was right about the career change. Then the tractor beam had caught him, and he'd woken up here in Barbara's tender care. A viewport dominated one wall because the Talveshi believed in psychological warfare as much as the conventional kind. Through it, Kern could see a planet. He decided to call it Steve, rotating slowly beneath the war moon's shadow. Steve looked pleasant enough from orbit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds arranged in patterns that suggested weather systems. Picturesque, really. The cities glowed at night, which meant someone was still down there. Someone who'd probably begged beautifully when the Talveshi arrived and got to keep breathing as a reward. Their world became a supply station. Their children learned Talveshi as a first language, and every morning they woke up under the shadow of the war moon that had conquered them. Could be worse, Kern muttered, testing his wrists against the neural inhibitors they'd clamped on him. The bands looked delicate, almost decorative, but they made his hands feel like they belonged to someone else. Could be married again. The door had been approached 17 times in 3 days. He'd counted. Guards changing shift, he assumed, though they never entered and never spoke. But twice, just twice. The footsteps had stopped directly outside for longer than a shift change warranted. Someone was checking on him, someone curious. The 18th approach started now. Kern heard the distinctive rhythm of Talveshi armor, that slight harmonic ring their metal made, like bells designed by someone who hated joy. But this time the footsteps didn't stop. They continued, and the door began to iris open with a sound like silk tearing. Kern pushed himself upright, gravity be damned. If he was going to die, he'd do it on his feet. or at least on his knees. Standing was negotiable. The guard who entered was tall even by Talveshi standards, armor so dark it seemed to eat the light from Barbara's walls. The helmet was expressionless, a smooth curve that reflected Kern's bedraggled face back at him. He looked terrible. 3 days without a shower and only nutrient paste to eat had not improved his natural charm. "Let me guess," Kern said. "Room service, because I have notes about the breakfast menu." The guard said nothing but gestured with one armored hand. The meaning was clear enough. "Right, walking, I can do that. Been doing it for years, actually. Picked it up as a child." His legs disagreed with this assessment. The first 2 steps were more of a controlled fall, but he managed. Barbara helpfully adjusted the gravity to normal as he crossed the threshold, which was either mercy or a final courtesy before execution. Probably the latter. The corridor beyond was everything his cell wasn't: vast, soaring, built to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. The walls weren't just crystal here. They were asterisk living crystal, conducting streams of data in colors Kern was reasonably sure humans couldn't normally perceive. He caught glimpses of information flowing past. Ship manifests, resource allocations, the captured faces of 1,000 species filed and categorized. They passed a chamber where figures floated in stasis fields, frozen mid-scream or mid-prayer. A museum of conquest carefully preserved. Kern looked away. "You know," he said to his silent escort, "you people really need to work on your interior decorating. Maybe some plants. Earth plants are great, very forgiving. I had a cactus once that survived 3 tours and a divorce." The guard's pace never changed. 2 more guards joined them at an intersection, forming a triangle around Kern. Professional, efficient. The kind of security detail you used for someone important or dangerous. Kern was reasonably sure he didn't qualify as either anymore, but then his mind snagged on something. A memory, 6 months old and beer-soaked. Shore leave on Osiris-7, that neutral station where every species pretended they weren't spying on each other. He'd been alone at the bar, working through his 3rd drink and 2nd existential crisis, when she'd sat down next to him. Golden hair, sharp features, an accent that didn't quite fit any known human colony. She kept her hair down, covering her ears, and he'd been too polite or too drunk to ask why. They'd talked for hours, about command, about the weight of sending people to die, about whether mercy was weakness or strength. She'd asked about Earth, about what made humans keep fighting when any logical species would have surrendered years ago. He'd told her about stubbornness, about the collective human inability to accept the inevitable, about how spite was basically a renewable resource. She'd laughed at that, really laughed. The memory felt important somehow, but he couldn't figure out why. Probably just his mind grasping for pleasant thoughts before the unpleasant business of execution. The corridor terminated at a door 50 feet tall, carved from something that looked like obsidian, but moved like liquid when you weren't looking directly at it. Scenes of conquest covered every inch, worlds burning, fleets scattering, species kneeling. One guard finally spoke, voice modulated through the helmet into something that sounded like wind through a crypt. "The Queen shows mercy only to those who beg beautifully. I suggest you practice." Kern smiled despite everything. "I'm more of a freestyle beggar, never been good with rehearsals." The doors began to open and light spilled out, cold and white and final. "Showtime," Kern whispered, and stepped forward to meet whatever waited in the dark. The throne room swallowed him whole. Kern had seen cathedrals on Earth, back when such things still stood. He'd walked through the preserved ruins of Notre Dame under its reconstructed dome, felt small beneath arches that had witnessed centuries. This made those spaces look like closets. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, so complete it might have been the void itself. The floor was polished to a mirror finish, reflecting everything and revealing nothing. And between floor and infinite ceiling stood the throne, a massive seat carved from material that seemed to drink light, leaving a shadow darker than the absence of illumination should allow. On that throne sat a woman who made every intelligence briefing Kern had ever read suddenly feel inadequate. Queen Zalara of the Talveshi Empire, conqueror of the Rim worlds, the endless reign, death in beautiful form. She had more titles than Earth had functioning governments, which admittedly wasn't saying much these days. Her skin held the blue of deep oceans, shot through with patterns that moved like auroras beneath the surface. Golden hair cascaded past shoulders clad in armor that seemed grown rather than forged, organic curves that suggested both beauty and lethality. But it was her eyes that stopped him, amber and ancient, holding the weight of stars that had burned out before humanity learned to make fire. And her ears, long, sweeping upward to elegant points, unmistakable. Kern's knees hit the floor without his permission, not from reverence. The gravity had simply decided his standing privileges were revoked. Chains materialized around his wrists, solidifying from light itself, and he had to admit that was a neat trick. Painful but neat. Around the throne, the Void Guard stood in perfect formation. Their armor absorbed photons like black holes, making them appear as human-shaped absences in reality. 12 of them, each capable of killing him in approximately 37 different ways. Kern had read the briefings during the flight that got him captured. He'd thought they were exaggerating. Looking at them now, he suspected the briefings had been conservative. The Queen rose and the temperature dropped. Not metaphorically, Kern saw frost forming on his chains. Captain Davros Kern of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet. Her voice carried harmonics that made his teeth ache and his bones resonate in ways bones shouldn't. You have been brought before this court to answer for crimes against the Talveshi Empire and its sovereign territories. In my defense, Kern said, because apparently his mouth had decided survival was optional. Your sovereign territory seemed to include literally everywhere, so that's a bit of a setup. One of the Void Guards shifted, just slightly. The movement said I could make you regret that in a language older than words. Zalara's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those amber eyes. Amusement, irritation. A grocery list, hard to say. You violated our borders. You engaged in espionage. You refused to surrender when given the opportunity. She descended the steps toward him, each footfall silent despite armor that probably weighed more than his entire skeleton. These are capital offenses. The sentence is death. Seems excessive, Kern observed. I didn't even get a lawyer. Pretty sure that violates some kind of interstellar convention. We are not signatories to your conventions. Right. The whole we don't recognize your authority thing. Classic Empire move. Very retro. She stopped 3 paces from him, close enough that he could see the patterns moving beneath her skin weren't random. They formed equations, he realized. Mathematical proofs flowing across her body like living tattoos, calculating things his brain couldn't begin to parse. You are either very brave or very stupid, Zalara said. I've been told it's possible to be both. Efficient, really. Behind her, holographic displays materialized in the air. Earth, rotating slowly, vulnerable and blue and heartbreakingly small. The moon, its surface scarred by the war that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. Mars, its domes gleaming like blisters on red skin. Your world is dying, Captain. Your fleets are scattered. Your colonies are isolated. This war has been over for months. You simply haven't accepted it yet. Kern wanted to argue, but the displays made lying difficult. Earth's orbital defenses were down to 30%. The fleet had been whittled from 200 ships to maybe 40 functional vessels. Mars was rationing air. Luna City had gone dark 3 weeks ago. We're scrappy, he said instead. It's kind of our thing. Scrappy? Zalara pronounced the word like she was dissecting it. An interesting choice. Your species mistakes stubbornness for strength. It will be your extinction. Better than begging beautifully. I'm told that's the local custom. Her fingers drummed against her armored thigh. A rhythmic pattern. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. Something about it nagged at Kern's memory, but the thought slipped away before he could catch it. "I am offering you a choice that few receive," the Queen continued. "Surrender the coordinates to Earth's remaining installations. Provide access codes to your defensive networks. Do this and your world becomes a protectorate. Your people will live. They will serve, but they will breathe. And if I refuse, then we find Earth anyway. It takes longer. More of your people die in the search. And when we arrive, there will be no quarter, no mercy, no protectorate status. Only annexation and whatever populations survive the orbital bombardment." The casual way she said it made Kern's stomach turn. She wasn't threatening, she was explaining. The difference felt important. "You've done this before," he said quietly. 147 times, some surrendered quickly. Others fought beautifully and died the same way. The outcome is always identical. Depressing consistency. Efficient consistency. Kern laughed. He couldn't help it. The absurdity crashed over him like a wave. Here he was, having a philosophical debate about genocide with a woman who could probably level cities with a thought. The laughter died when Zalara leaned closer, close enough that he could smell something like ozone and starlight, and said, "I know about the resonance engine." The words hit him like a physical blow. The resonance engine, Project Longshot. The theoretical weapon that existed only in classified files and fever dreams of Earth's most desperate scientists. The thing that might, maybe, possibly, if a dozen impossible breakthroughs happened simultaneously, give humanity a fighting chance. "Never heard of it," Kern said, but his voice had gone flat. "The device designed to destabilize our phase drive technology, render our fleet immobile, turn our greatest advantage into our vulnerability." Her smile was sharp enough to cut. "You keep it in the Cheyenne complex, underground, shielded, incomplete." She was right about all of it, which meant Earth had a leak, a catastrophic species-ending leak. But then Kern's mind caught on something. She'd said Cheyenne complex. The actual facility was called the Cheyenne installation. Complex was the designation they'd put in the false files, the ones salted with deliberate errors to identify information breaches. Someone had fed her bad intelligence, and she'd believed it, which meant her intelligence wasn't perfect, which meant she'd gotten this information personally, probably through infiltration, and hadn't cross-checked it against other sources. His mind raced backward, connecting dots he hadn't known existed. That woman on Osiris-7, the one with the golden hair and covered ears, the one who'd asked so many careful questions about Earth, about humanity, about what made them fight, the one whose fingers had drummed on the bar. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. The same pattern Zalara was tapping now. Recognition hit him like a missile strike. The queen of the Talveshi Empire, who commanded fleets and conquered worlds, had personally gone undercover to a dingy bar on a neutral station to talk to him. To Davros Kern, a middle-ranked captain with a drinking problem and a failed marriage. She'd sat there, laughed at his jokes, let him buy her drinks with credits that were probably counterfeit. The sheer, ridiculous impossibility of it overwhelmed every survival instinct he had left. Kern started laughing again, really laughing this time, the kind that came from the diaphragm and didn't stop for permission. The laughter echoed in the throne room's perfect acoustics, multiplying until it sounded like a dozen Kerns were all sharing the same joke, which, in a way, they were. Zalara's fingers stopped their drumming. Her expression froze in a way that suggested she'd forgotten what freezing felt like and was having to relearn it in real time. The Void Guard shifted as one, hands moving toward weapons that probably violated several laws of physics. The air itself seemed to tighten, pressure building like a storm about to break. Kern couldn't stop. Every time he tried to compose himself, another wave hit him. The Queen of Talvesh, the woman who'd spent 40 minutes arguing with him about whether pre-war Earth literature was too obsessed with dystopias. The same person who'd admitted she'd never tried coffee and had been genuinely delighted when he'd ordered her one, despite it tasting like what he'd charitably described as burnt regret. You, he gasped between laughs, chains rattling as his shoulders shook. You actually did it. You went full spy. Never go full spy. Silence. Her voice carried enough harmonic force to crack stone, but Kern was too far gone. The bartender. Oh gods, the bartender kept calling you sweetheart, and you didn't know if you should have him executed or just leave a bad tip. One of the Void Guard took a step forward. Zalara's hand came up, halting the movement, but the gesture looked uncertain in a way that probably terrified her court more than his laughter did. You bought, Kern wheezed, trying to catch his breath. You bought that terrible Rigelian whiskey because I said it tasted like starlight, and you wanted to know if I was being poetic or if I'd had a stroke. Then you drank it and made a face like, enough. The word hit like a pressure wave. Kern's laughter cut off, not from fear but from sudden lack of oxygen. The gravity around him had intensified, pressing him flat against the mirror floor. He stared up at her, still grinning despite his compressed lungs. She looked down at him, and for the first time since he'd entered, he saw something other than imperial certainty in those amber eyes. She looked afraid, not of him, of what he knew, of what he represented, of a moment 6 months ago when she'd been something other than the endless rain. How did you know? She asked quietly, and the question was for him alone despite the guards and courtiers witnessing every word. The pattern, Kern managed, gravity easing just enough to let him speak. 323. You did it at the bar when you were thinking. You're doing it now. Not exactly common. Many beings have nervous habits. Sure, but combined with the ears you kept covered, the accent you couldn't quite place, the way you asked questions like you were conducting an interview disguised as drunk philosophy, and the fact that you knew the internal code name for a project that shouldn't exist. He smiled, call it an educated guess. Zalara's jaw tightened. Around them, the court had gone silent in a way that suggested everyone was trying very hard to become invisible. You were gathering intelligence, Kern continued, because apparently survival instincts were completely optional today. Personal reconnaissance. Wanted to understand the enemy directly instead of through reports. Very hands-on leadership. I respect it. You respect nothing. You are a prisoner awaiting execution. True, but I'm a prisoner who got to watch the Queen of the Talveshi Empire try coffee for the first time and immediately regret every choice that led to that moment. That's got to count for something. Her hand moved to her sword hilt, a gesture so fast it blurred. The Void Guard responded instantly, weapons charging with a sound like reality tearing, but she didn't draw. Her fingers just rested there, trembling with what might have been rage or might have been something more complicated. You told me, she said, voice dangerously soft, that humans fight because surrender feels like dying slowly, that you'd rather burn fast than fade. I remember, you said that was illogical. I said it was inefficient. Potato, doesn't really work in text format. The almost smile that flickered across her face lasted maybe a microsecond, but Kern caught it. Point to him. What else did you tell me, Captain? What else did I learn during that intelligence gathering? Kern thought back, his mind surprisingly clear despite the mortal peril. They'd talked about a lot. Command decisions. The weight of responsibility. She'd asked what kept him going when everything seemed hopeless. He'd told her about spite. I said humanity runs on spite and bad coffee, that we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. That our entire military strategy is basically, if we're going down, we're taking you with us, elevated to an art form. You also said, Zalara continued, descending another step, that any commander worth following understands the difference between sacrifice and waste. That throwing lives away isn't strategy. It's cowardice dressed in uniform. Kern blinked. He'd said that, late in the conversation after the fourth drink when things had gotten philosophical. He'd been thinking about his ex-wife, about the arguments that had ended their marriage, about missions that had cost too much for too little. Yeah, he said quietly, I remember. Do you still believe it? What kind of question is that? An important one. She was close now, close enough that he could see the equations flowing across her skin were solving and resolving, like she was processing multiple scenarios simultaneously. You are here because you refused to run. Your crew scattered to save you. You purged the database to protect Earth. These were sacrifices. That was survival. Was it, or was it spite in disguise? Kern opened his mouth, closed it. The question had teeth. Here is what troubles me, Captain Davros Kern. Zalara crouched, bringing herself to eye level with him despite the undignified position it put her in. Her court probably hadn't seen her at eye level with anyone in centuries. In 6 months of intelligence gathering, analyzing human behavior, studying your tactics and strategies, I have found no logical reason why your species continues fighting. Your losses are catastrophic. Your resources are depleted. Victory is mathematically impossible. And yet you laugh in my throne room. You make jokes about coffee while chained before an execution. You show no fear. Oh, I'm terrified. I'm just also amused. Humans are excellent multitaskers. Her eyes narrowed. What do you know that I don't? About what? About why you're laughing. About why you're not begging. About why, she stopped, recalculating. You know something that makes this amusing to you. Kern's grin widened, because she was right. He did know something, not about weapons or strategies or some secret that would turn the war. Something better. He knew that 6 months ago, the queen of the Talveshi Empire had been curious enough about humanity to risk going among them. Curious enough to spend an evening listening to a mediocre captain complain about military rations and failed marriages. Curious enough to try coffee despite knowing she'd hate it. Which meant for all her talk of efficiency and inevitability, some part of her still asked questions, still wondered, still wanted to understand rather than simply conquer. That was a weakness, or maybe it was the opposite. You want to know why I'm laughing? Kern asked. Yes. Because you're doing it again. Right now. Instead of just executing me, you're asking questions. You want to understand. And that means you're not sure. The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife and served as dinner. Zalara stood slowly, her armor catching the light in ways that made it look alive. When she spoke, her voice carried enough cold to freeze atmospheres. I am offering you one final chance, Captain. Surrender Earth's coordinates. Give me what I need, or I will take it from your world's ashes. No. I mean, probably still no after you threaten me more, but let's save time and skip to that part. Her hand moved in a gesture that made reality bend. Holograms exploded around them, not of Earth this time, but of battles. Hundreds of them, worlds burning, fleets dying, species kneeling. This is what happens to those who refuse, Zalara said. Yeah, I figured. You've got a very consistent brand. Then why are you still smiling? Because, Kern didn't say. 6 months ago you asked me if mercy was weakness, and you actually seemed to care about the answer. Instead, he said, because you're still asking questions instead of just killing me. Which means somewhere in there, he nodded toward her, you're still not sure if we're worth exterminating or worth understanding. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The words hung in the air between them like a grenade with an unpredictable timer. Zalara's expression went through several phases in the span of a heartbeat. Anger, certainly. Surprise, definitely. But underneath it all, something that looked dangerously close to recognition. You presume much for a man in chains, she said, but the harmonic edge in her voice had softened by maybe 3%. Kern was counting. It's a gift. My ex-wife used to say, I had a terminal case of optimism, poorly disguised as sarcasm. She sounds wise. She married me, so the evidence suggests otherwise. One of the Void Guard made a sound that might have been a cough, or might have been a very restrained laugh. Kern decided to believe it was the latter because hope was free, and he was definitely not getting out of here with his credit account intact. Zalara's fingers resumed their drumming, 323. The pattern was automatic now, which meant she was thinking hard enough that her conscious control had slipped. At Osiris 7, she said slowly, you told me a story. About a mission you commanded, the rescue operation at Titan's Gate. Kern's stomach tightened. He'd told that story after the fifth drink, when his judgment had been thoroughly compromised by alcohol and what he'd thought was a sympathetic stranger. "I remember," he said carefully. "You had orders to retreat. The station was lost. Evacuation was complete except for one ship, a civilian transport that had suffered drive failure. 1,200 people trapped in a decaying orbit." 1,700, Kern corrected quietly. "We got the count wrong in the initial assessment. You went back for them, against orders, against tactical sense. Your superiors threatened court-martial. They did court-martial me. I got demoted, spent 6 months filing logistics reports as punishment. Yet you told the story as if it were amusing. It was. You should have seen my commanding officer's face when I explained that discretionary judgment in fluid tactical situations technically covered going rogue to save civilians. He turned a color I didn't know humans could achieve." Zalara tilted her head, and the movement was so similar to that woman in the bar that Kern felt his certainty crystallize into absolute conviction. Same gesture, same angle, same unconscious curiosity. "You saved 1,700 lives and were punished for it," she said. "This strikes you as reasonable." "Of course not, but I'd do it again, that's the point." "The point is illogical. The point is human." She considered this, equations flowing faster across her skin. Kern was starting to recognize some of them: probability calculations, resource assessments, strategic projections. Her body was literally working through the problem of him in real time. "When I asked you why you did it," Zalara continued, "you said something I have not forgotten. You said that every person you save is one more middle finger to the universe's indifference. That spite isn't just defiance. It's a refusal to accept that mathematics determines morality." "I said that. I was more philosophical drunk than I remember." "You were extremely philosophical, also extremely incorrect about which Earth bands were objectively the best. Classical rock is not superior to all other musical forms." "It absolutely is, and I will die on this hill, probably literally, given current circumstances." The almost smile came back, lasting a full second this time. Progress. But then her expression hardened again, and Kern recognized the look of someone forcibly remembering their own authority. "Your philosophy changes nothing, Captain. Sentiment does not alter strategic reality. Earth will fall whether I execute you now or in a year. Maybe, but you're still talking to me instead of just doing it. I am attempting to understand why you persist in this delusion." "No," Kern said, and the chains rattled as he shifted to face her more directly despite the gravity trying to flatten him. "You're attempting to understand if what I said at the bar was true. If humans really are too stupid to quit, or if there's something else. Something you haven't calculated." Her hand moved and the gravity doubled. Kern's ribs creaked under the pressure, but he kept his eyes on hers. "You think you have deduced something about me," Zalara said, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You believe that one evening of conversation gives you insight into my nature." "I think," Kern gasped, "that the Queen of the Talveshi Empire doesn't personally conduct intelligence gathering unless she's looking for something reports can't provide. I think you went to Osiris 7 because you wanted to know if we were really the mindless savages your briefings claimed. And I think you got an answer you didn't like. Which was, that we're not. That we're complicated and contradictory and we make terrible decisions for good reasons. That we're people, not problems to be solved with sufficient firepower." The silence that followed was broken by a sound Kern hadn't expected: applause. Slow, deliberate, and coming from one of the courtiers who'd been so still he'd forgotten they existed. Zalara's head snapped toward the sound, and the courtier wisely decided that discretion was the better part of continued existence. The applause stopped. "Brave," the queen said, turning back to Kern, "or suicidal. I have not determined which. I vote brave, sounds better on a tombstone. You will not have a tombstone. Executed traitors are recycled into the ship's organic systems. Gross. Also, pretty sure you have to be a citizen of something to be a traitor to it. I'm just an enemy combatant. Semantics. Important semantics. There's forms for this kind of thing. Bureaucracy matters even in galactic empires. Probably especially in galactic empires. Zalara made a sound that was absolutely, definitely a laugh. Short, quickly suppressed, but unmistakable. Several void guards shifted uncomfortably, as if they just witnessed something that violated fundamental constants of the universe. "You are," she said, recovering her composure, "the most infuriating prisoner I have encountered in 300 years. I'm honored. What happened to the previous record holder? I had them executed. Right mood killer that." She moved then, circling him like a predator assessing prey. Kern tracked her with his eyes, unable to turn his head under the gravity's weight. "Here is what I cannot reconcile," Zalara said, more to herself than to him. "Your species is dying, your hope is manufactured, your resistance is mathematical impossibility, yet you laugh, you joke, you refuse to bend even when bending would save you. It's our brand," Kern managed. "We're committed to it." "It is insanity. It's human." She stopped directly in front of him again, close enough that he could see his reflection in her armor, bedraggled, beaten, but somehow still grinning like an idiot. "That woman you met at the bar," Kern said, because if he was going to die he might as well go out swinging. "The one who asked all those questions about Earth, who wanted to know what coffee tasted like, who spent 40 minutes debating whether Shakespeare would have been better with more explosions. He would not have been. He absolutely would have been. But that's not my point. My point is she seemed genuinely curious. Like she actually wanted to understand, not just conquer. And I've been thinking about that a lot over the past 3 days while Barbara, that's my cell's AI, has been making my life miserable." "Barbara, long story. But here's the thing that's been bothering me. You've conquered 147 worlds. You've done this dance 147 times, and yet you still went to a bar to talk to some random captain about philosophy and music." Zalara's expression was unreadable, but her fingers had stopped drumming. "That suggests," Kern continued, "that despite the efficiency and inevitability and mathematical certainty, some part of you is still asking questions, still wondering if there's a different way. Still thinking that maybe, just maybe, the universe is more complicated than your calculations account for. You know nothing of what I think. Maybe not, but I know what you asked me. You asked if I ever wondered if fighting was worth it, if the cost was too high, if surrender might be mercy." Her eyes narrowed, and you said. "I said that asking the question was already the answer. That anyone who stops wondering has stopped being worth following." The words settled between them like dust after an explosion, and for a moment the throne room existed in perfect stillness. Then Zalara's hand rose, and every weapon in the chamber came to life. The Void Guards' rifles hummed with lethal energy. The courtiers pressed themselves against walls, trying to become part of the architecture. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. But Kern saw what others might have missed. The Queen's hand was shaking. Barely, microscopically, but enough. "You dare," she whispered, and the harmonics in her voice made his bones vibrate, "to quote my own words back to me. To suggest that She stopped, recalculating. "You are attempting to manipulate me using a conversation you should not even remember. I was drunk, not unconscious. Big difference. You were also supposed to believe I was a merchant trader, not," she gestured at herself, "at the throne, at the empire. This. In my defense, you were very convincing. The whole, pretending to be interested in my opinions thing really sold it. I was interested in your opinions. That was the problem." The admission hung there, unplanned and unrehearsed. Several courtiers actually gasped. One of the Void Guard's weapons dipped slightly before snapping back to attention. Zalara closed her eyes briefly, and Kern could practically hear her internal monologue cursing in 17 languages. "Well," Kern said into the silence, This is awkward. Silence. Right, shutting up, known for that me. But he wasn't shutting up, and they both knew it, because something had shifted. The game had changed. The queen who conquered worlds had accidentally revealed that she'd been changed by a conversation in a bar, and that was either going to get him killed immediately or something else. You want to know the really funny part? Kern asked, because survival instincts were apparently decorative at this point. I almost didn't go to that bar, was going to just stay on the ship, file reports, be responsible. But my navigator said I needed to engage with humanity, or I'd turn into a bitter recluse who yelled at ensigns. Your navigator gave wise counsel. She did. I should probably tell her that if I survive this. But you will not survive this. You keep saying that, but we're still talking, starting to think you're bluffing. Zalara's eyes snapped open and they were blazing. I do not bluff. I am offering you one final. Yeah, final chance, surrender or die. I've heard the speech. Very dramatic, excellent delivery, but here's my counteroffer. Kern grinned despite the gravity crushing him. You let me go. I promise not to tell anyone that the endless rain has a curious streak a mile wide and secretly wonders if conquering everything is actually the right answer. The temperature dropped so fast that frost crystallized on his chains. That, Zalara said very softly, is not how this works. Sure it is. I've seen enough bad spy thrillers to know how this goes. You can't kill me because I know something embarrassing. I can't escape because, well, obvious reasons. So we're stuck in this mutually awkward situation until someone makes a decision. I could simply execute you and be done with it. You could, but you won't. What makes you so certain? Because, Kern said, meeting her eyes directly, you're still asking questions. And people who ask questions don't usually kill the people with interesting answers. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Zalara made a gesture and the gravity released. Kern gasped as his lungs remembered how to work properly, pulling himself to his knees. Everyone out, the queen said. The court froze. I said out. All of you, now. The void guard shifted uncertainly. One of them, probably the commander, stepped forward. Your Majesty, protocol requires. Protocol requires you to follow my orders, which I am giving you now. Clear the room. The silence was deafening. Then slowly, the void guard began to move. Courtiers scrambled for exits. Within 30 seconds, the throne room was empty except for Kern and Zalara. Well, Kern said, this is either very good or spectacularly bad for my life expectancy. Zalara descended the final steps and sat on the floor in front of him. Actually sat, cross-legged, armor and all. It was possibly the most surreal thing Kern had witnessed, and he'd once seen a space whale eat a frigate. You are correct, she said quietly. I went to Osiris 7 to understand. My report said humans were simple, brutal, short-lived and shorter-sighted. But the mathematics did not explain your persistence, so I went to see for myself. And I met a mediocre captain who made terrible jokes and worse tactical assessments, who bought drinks he could not afford with credits that were obviously counterfeit, who spoke about his failures like they were achievements and his doubts like they were wisdom. But you're really selling me here. And I could not reconcile this person, this chaotic, contradictory, absurd person with the threat assessments. You are not supposed to be human. I mean, I am literally human. You are supposed to be data, numbers, acceptable losses in an efficient conquest. Her fingers drummed against her knee, 323. But you spoke about your crew like they were family, about missions that cost too much, about wondering if any of it meant anything. Heavy conversation for a bar. I asked heavy questions. You did. And I answered them honestly because I thought you were just another lost soul trying to figure out if the universe made sense. Turns out you were reconnoitering. Turns out I was doing both. Kern blinked, I returned to my fleet with more questions than answers. My advisors said this proved humans were dangerous, unpredictable variables in clean calculations. I agreed. I authorized the current offensive. I told myself that sentiment was not strategy. But I kept thinking about what you said, about the difference between sacrifice and waste, about spite being a renewable resource, about how anyone who stops asking questions stops being worth following. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that might have been doubt or might have been hope. I have led this empire for 1,000 years. I have never questioned the necessity of conquest, until I sat in a bar and argued with a drunk captain about whether coffee was worth the calories it cost to produce. For the record, it absolutely is. It tastes like burnt regret. That's what I said. We agreed on this. A smile flickered across her face, genuine and unstudied. We did, among other things. Kern's chains were still active, but they felt less important suddenly. So what happens now? You still planning to execute me, or are we workshopping alternatives? I do not know. The admission seemed to cost her. You have created a problem I cannot calculate away. If I execute you, I eliminate a variable. If I release you, I create chaos. If I keep you prisoner, I admit weakness. Sounds like you need better options. What would you suggest? Me, I'm just a mediocre captain who makes terrible jokes. You are also the only person in 1,000 years who has made me reconsider my certainties. So, suggest. Kern thought about it. About Earth dying slowly. About his crew scattered across the galaxy. About a queen who conquered worlds but still wondered if she was doing it right. How about this, he said slowly. You let me go. I don't give you Earth's coordinates because that would be treasonous and also bad for my people. But I also don't tell anyone about our conversation because, honestly, who would believe me? And maybe, just maybe, we both agree that the universe is complicated and perhaps total conquest isn't the only option available. You are suggesting détente. I'm suggesting we both acknowledge that maybe, possibly, there are questions worth asking before we blow each other up. My empire does not do détente. Your empire also doesn't usually have its queen sitting on the floor, having existential conversations with prisoners. Today's full of firsts. Zalara laughed, actually laughed full and genuine, the sound echoing in the empty throne room. You are absolutely infuriating. I know it's my best quality. She stood, offering him a hand. He stared at it for a moment before taking it. She pulled him to his feet with strength that suggested she could probably throw him through a wall if she wanted. The chains dissolved into light and faded. I am not releasing you because you convinced me, Zalara said. I am releasing you because I require more data. You will return to Earth. You will tell them nothing of this conversation. In 6 months, we will negotiate. Until then, consider this a temporary suspension of hostilities in your sector. You're serious. I am a 1,000-year-old monarch who just admitted doubt to a prisoner. I am either serious or having a catastrophic mental breakdown. I am choosing to believe it is the former. For what it's worth, Kern said, I think asking questions is the opposite of a breakdown. We shall see. Now leave before I remember that this is absurd and change my mind. Kern started toward the door, then stopped. Hey, about the coffee. If we're doing this whole negotiation thing in 6 months, maybe I could bring some better beans. Show you that it doesn't have to taste like burnt regret. Zalara's expression was unreadable. That would be acceptable. Cool, it's a date, diplomatic date, professional beverage exchange. Leave, Captain Kern. Leaving. He made it to the door before her voice stopped him one more time. Davros. He turned. Thank you, she said quietly, for treating me like a person in that bar, not a queen, just someone asking questions. Any time. Well, hopefully not in another throne room. Maybe stick to bars. He left before she could respond, walking past confused void guard and bewildered courtiers, grinning like an absolute idiot. 6 months. Enough time to figure out how to explain this to Earth Command. Enough time to find really good coffee beans. Enough time to see if a queen and a captain could find a better answer than war. He was probably going to get court-martialed again. Worth it.